When a veteran's flag is called visual nonsense by his HOA, a battle ignites. But what happens next is something no one expected. With a disapproving frown etched deep into his face, Mark Johnson, the newly elected president of the Oakville Homeowners Association, marched up the pathway to a modest brick home. A manila folder was tucked tightly under his arm. He didn't bother knocking, just raised his voice with a sharp, patronizing tone. "Mr. Olton," he called out, "we need to discuss the matter of your flag." Richard Tunn. Olton, a 60-year-old Vietnam veteran, looked up from his morning coffee, a creeping unease settling into his gut. He stood slowly and walked to the porch. The flag, his flag, fluttered gently in the wind beside him. "What about it?" Tunn asked, his brow furrowing. Johnson held up the folder like it was a badge of righteousness. "The HOA has implemented a new rule regarding the size and placement of flags on properties. Yours violates these guidelines and must be removed within 24 hours. Tunn felt the weight of those words hit him harder than any round he'd faced in Nam. That flag had flown at his outpost, stained by jungle storms and gunpowder. It wasn't just cloth. It was memory. It was sacrifice. It was home. "This flag means everything to me," Tunn said quietly, his voice trembling. "It's a tribute to the men who didn't make it back." But Johnson wasn't moved. Be that as it may, rules are rules. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Tunn stunned on his porch, the flag fluttering behind him like a silent witness. The notice came the next day. Legal action would follow if Tunn didn't comply. But Tunn wasn't backing down. He reached out to the HOA board directly, requesting a meeting. If he could just explain what that flag represented, if they knew the faces it symbolized, the blood behind the stripes, maybe they'd reconsider. On a brisk autumn evening, Tunn walked into the community center with shoulders squared and eyes steady. Across the room, Johnson sat at the head of the table, like a man preparing for war. Tunn sat, cleared his throat, and began. He spoke not as a plaintiff, but as a Marine. He told stories of bravery and brotherhood. He painted the jungles of Vietnam in words, described the faces of the men he'd lost, and the vow he made to honor them. Some board members shifted in their seats, their expressions softening. Johnson, stone cold. "While we appreciate your service, Mr. Olton," he said, his voice still oozing condescension, "your flag violates community policy. Exceptions can't be made." Tunn clenched his fists under the table, knuckles whitening. He had come in good faith, but now it was clear. Johnson wasn't here for compromise. He was here for control. Tunn stood. "You may see it as a nuisance. I see it as sacred. That flag stands for sacrifice, not style. You want it down? Take me to court. I've faced worse battles than this." The community buzzed with whispers. Some shook their heads at Tunn. Others offered quiet support. But when local news picked up the story, everything changed. "Veteran faces HOA over flag display," the headlines read. It spread fast. By the time Tunn stepped into court, he wasn't alone. Veterans groups rallied, neighbors waved flags, protesters gathered outside the courthouse with signs, "Let the flag fly, honor our heroes." But behind the scenes, something darker brewed. Reporters, digging into the dispute, uncovered a history. 6 years earlier, at a community BBQ, Tunn had been sharing stories with a group of kids when Johnson, a newcomer at the time, interrupted. "You're filling their heads with lies," he'd said, furious. Turns out Johnson wasn't just anti-flag, he was anti-Tunn. As a former aid worker in Africa, Johnson blamed American military interventions for the suffering he'd witnessed abroad. And Tunn, proud and unapologetic about his service, became a lightning rod for that resentment. Their confrontation had drawn a crowd that day, ending in a heated exchange that bruised egos and set the stage for years of tension. Now, with Johnson in power, that feud had gone from backyard arguments to the courtroom. Back in court, Tunn took the stand. His hands, scarred and steady, gripped the rail. He didn't read from notes. "This isn't about fabric," he said, voice clear. "It's about brothers who never came home. That flag was the last thing they saw. It gave us hope in the jungle, a reason to keep going. I fly it for them. I fly it because freedom isn't free." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge, a Gulf War vet, was misty-eyed. Then the bombshell. A board member stood up, visibly shaken. A whistleblower. She revealed that Johnson had manipulated the board, twisted rules, and pushed personal grudges into official policy. He never expected Ton to fight back, but Ton had. The judge slammed the gavel with finality. The HOA's actions were discriminatory and unjust. Mr. Olton may keep his flag. Case dismissed. The courtroom erupted. Applause. Cheers. Veterans saluted. Ton just stood there, silent, his eyes fixed on the folded flag in his hands. In the days that followed, Ton's story inspired a movement. Homeowners across the country began challenging unfair HOA rules. Veterans shared their own stories. A debate reignited. Where do community rules end and personal freedoms begin? But for Ton, the fight was never about winning. It was about memory, about pride, about never letting the people he lost be forgotten. The flag flew high over his porch, and this time, it wasn't coming down. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, stand tall.